The morning light of Xerion Prime stretched across the Galactic Naval Academy stone courtyards. Learners from 12 worlds moved through towering halls, their bodies showing strange forms, scales that shimmered, and eyes that saw colors beyond what humans could imagine. But everyone talked about one thing: humans. Sixth glided through the hallways with easy confidence. Her crystalline body caught and threw back the light in sharp rays. Other students moved out of her way, knowing she was among the smartest minds in her class. Behind her came Creor, a Varan whose powerful brain could process fight information faster than machines. "Did you hear Morrison talking yesterday?" Sixth asked, her voice musical and clear. He claimed human cavalry charges were useful military tactics. "Cavalry charges!" "When everyone uses energy weapons now." Creor's four eyes blinked one after another, his people's way of showing amusement. Humans think running at enemies with sharp sticks is real war. No surprise the Galactic Council banned them from actual military work. They entered a big lecture hall already crowded with students. The room hummed with speech in 20 different languages, but one subject dominated: the rule that kept humans away from military operations. Every student knew the basic story. Humans had joined the Galactic family 50 years ago. They wanted to help with military work across the galaxy, but something bad happened during their early battles. The details stayed secret, but the result was clear. The Galactic Council made a rule limiting humans to small supporting roles and simple scouting missions only. It was the right choice, said Veltar, whose people evolved from deep ocean creatures. Her wet skin gleamed under the lights. Humans lack the thinking needed for modern warfare. They focus on one-on-one combat instead of fleet battles. Exactly right, agreed Zixth. Their brains cannot handle real strategy. They rely on feeling and instinct instead of logic. The talk stopped when Lieutenant Jake Morrison entered. He was tall for a human with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. His uniform was clean and sharp, and he carried himself with quiet strength, even though his students barely hid their smirks. Morrison set his materials on the desk and looked at the class. He could see the grins and hear the whispered comments. After 3 years teaching here, he knew what to expect. "Good morning," Morrison said simply. "Today we study human military history by looking at the siege tactics used at the Battle of Earth." Laughter rippled through the room. Zixth raised her hand without waiting. "Lieutenant Morrison, with respect, why study such outdated tactics? The human rule exists because your species could not master modern warfare. Surely we should focus on strategies from more advanced civilizations." Morrison paused, his face calm. "The Academy requires students to understand military history of all member species, which includes humans. The rule exists for a reason. Humans proved during first contact that they cannot manage large military operations," added Creor. "Your own council agreed that humans are too unpredictable and risky to handle real war." More voices murmured in agreement around the room. Morrison had heard this 100 times. He brought up an image display showing ancient Earth battles. "Let us look at the choices these commanders made. Watch how they changed their approach based on what supplies they had and what the ground offered them." "Changed?" laughed Zixth, her crystal features reflecting the images. "You mean they threw soldiers at the problem until something worked? There is no beauty, no precision, no math in human tactics. Just brute force and acceptable deaths." The rest of the class joined the laughter. Morrison continued teaching, but fewer students paid attention. Instead, they whispered about human failures and primitive methods. In the back, Dr. Helen Carter watched with growing worry. She was the Academy's human connection, making sure human students and workers fit into galactic society. But fitting in was getting harder when other species saw humans as less intelligent. Carter had been here 5 years and things were getting worse, not better. What bothered her most was that she knew the real reason behind the restriction. She had access to secret files these students would never see. Files with recordings and reports from humanity's early battles in space. Files that would change what these proud young minds believed about human warfare. But the Galactic Council sealed those files on purpose. They decided some truths were too risky to share. As class ended, students walked out still joking about human military failure. Zixth was already planning a research paper called "Why Humans Should Stay Restricted, a Study in Inferior Combat Thinking." Carter approached Morrison as the last students left. "Another good day?" she asked with bitter humor. Morrison packed his things slowly. "They will understand eventually." Will they graduate thinking humans are barely developed creatures who just happen to make spaceships? Morrison looked at her with those steady gray eyes. Doctor, you and I both know why the restriction really exists. The question is whether these students are ready to learn the truth. Carter thought about the secret files in her office. Recordings from Kepler 442, New Geneva, and dozens of other worlds where human soldiers worked before the restriction came. Recordings that explained why the Galactic Council really feared human military power. Maybe it is time they learned, she said quietly. Morrison nodded. Maybe it is. Outside, Zixth was gathering support for a petition to remove human military history from the curriculum completely. She believed she was fighting against outdated thinking and poor tactics. She had no idea she was about to learn the scariest lesson of her life. 3 days later, Zixth stood before Dean Cordell's huge desk, holding a datapad filled with names. The dean was an impressive sight even by galactic standards. His 6 arms moved on their own as he reviewed papers, signed documents, and used multiple computer screens at the same time. His pale blue skin looked like old marble, and his large black eyes noticed everything. Dean Cordell, Zixth began, her voice filled with assured authority. I present a petition signed by over 200 students from 11 different species. We ask that human military history be removed from our curriculum immediately. The dean stopped his work and focused all his attention on the young Zilonian. This is a serious request, Miss Zixth. What reasons do you give for this change? Creor stepped forward, his powerful brain already organizing their arguments. Sir, we think that studying outdated human warfare is beneath our level. We could spend that time learning advanced strategy from more developed civilizations. The human rule proves that humans are unfit for real military work. Why should we study tactics of a species that the Galactic Council says is too risky to trust? Dean Cordell leaned back, his 6 arms folding to show he was thinking deeply. You believe human military methods have no value? None whatsoever, Zixth said firmly. Human tactics come from basic instincts and emotion. They lack the math and logic that real military science needs. Learning from humans actually makes us worse strategists because it teaches us to think like savages. The dean was quiet for a long time. As leader of the most important military academy in the galaxy, he had seen many young minds full of pride. But he also valued knowledge above all else, even knowledge that made people uncomfortable. I will think about your petition, he said finally. But first I want you to attend a special presentation this afternoon. A human military observer is visiting and has offered to show some historical recordings to interested students. Zixth's crystal features lit up. Perfect. This will let us show other students how inadequate human military thinking really is. Exactly right, Creor agreed. Real evidence of human failure will convince more people than just talking about it. Dean Cordell made a note on his datapad. I will set up the presentation in the main auditorium. Dr. Carter will help with the technical setup. As the students left buzzing with excitement, Dean Cordell touched a communication device on his desk. Dr. Carter, come to my office right away and ask Commander Turner to join us. 20 minutes later, Dr. Helen Carter sat across from the dean while Commander Alex Turner stood by the window. Turner was older than Morrison, with gray hair and scars on his hands from actual military service. His uniform had honors that most academy students would not recognize, but Carter knew they represented fighting in far-off star systems. The students asked to see recordings of human military operations, Dean Cordell explained. They believe it will support their petition to remove human studies from our program. Turner turned from the window, his expression unreadable. They want to see recordings. Yes, Carter said, feeling nervous. They expect to see human failure and poor tactics. They think it will prove the restriction was right. Turner was quiet for a moment, then reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data device. The black metal tool had red warning labels in multiple languages. Commander, this is highly classified, Carter said, recognizing the marks. Are you sure about this, Doctor? These students will become the next leaders of galactic military forces. They will graduate believing humans are undeveloped barbarians who got lucky with spaceships. That thinking could cause real danger. Dean Cordell studied the data device with interest. What does this contain? Combat recordings from the Kepler 442 incident, Turner replied. Full documentation of human military operations before the restriction rule was made. Carter felt her stomach tighten. She had read the reports from Kepler 442, but never saw the actual recordings. The written accounts alone had given her nightmares. Commander, that recording is classified at the highest level. The Galactic Council specifically ordered it sealed to prevent panic among member species. Turner met her gaze steadily. The classification was to stop panic among regular people. These are military academy students. If they are going to make fun of human warfare, they should understand what they are making fun of. Dean Cordell held out one of his 6 hands. May I see this data device? Turner handed it over. The recordings are real and not changed. They show exactly what happened when 200 human soldiers met 50,000 Vakor swarm warriors. The Dean's large black eyes widened slightly. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Vakor. They were an insect-like race that had eaten 3 entire star systems before disappearing 50 years ago. Most historians thought they just moved to another galaxy. The humans fought the Vakor, Dean Cordell asked. The humans destroyed the Vakor, Turner corrected. Completely. The entire species. That is why they vanished from galactic history. Carter stared at the commander. The reports never said humans caused their extinction. The report said many things that were not completely true, Turner said. The Galactic Council decided that some truths were too disturbing for most people to know. Dean Cordell held the data device carefully as if it might break. And you want to show this to my students? I want to show it to the students who think humans are primitives unfit for warfare. Let them see what human warfare really looks like. Then let them choose if they still want to remove human military history from their education. The afternoon sun began to set as students filled the main auditorium. Sixth had spread word about the presentation and almost the entire academy came. They expected to see poor human tactics and outdated strategies that would prove what they already believed about human weakness. Dr. Carter stood at the presentation desk, her hands shaking slightly as she connected the secret data device to the big auditorium screen. Commander Turner sat in the front row, his expression calm but ready. Before we begin, Carter announced to the packed room, I must warn you, this recording shows real combat. It has disturbing content and may challenge what you think about human military abilities. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Doctor, we are future military officers, Zixth called out. I think we can handle watching humans make tactical mistakes. More laughter filled the auditorium. Carter looked at Commander Turner, who nodded grimly. Very well, Carter said, starting the display. This recording is from the Kepler 442 incident. 50 years ago, during humanity's early work in galactic military operations. The lights dimmed and the massive screen filled with a view of a human military base under an alien sky. A date stamp in the corner showed it was 50 years and a few months ago. This was a normal evacuation mission, Carter continued. A civilian colony faced danger from an approaching Vakor swarm. A human unit was sent to help with evacuation and protect the retreat. The students settled back, ready to criticize human evacuation work and point out tactical errors. They had no idea they were about to watch the most terrifying military operation in galactic history. On screen, Captain Lisa Brooks gave orders to her soldiers, preparing for what seemed like a standard withdrawal. The alien students began taking notes, ready to record every human mistake they could find. They had no idea that in the next hour, everything they knew about warfare would change forever. The recording started with what looked like a normal military base on a peaceful planet. Human soldiers moved through the compound, checking equipment and loading supply trucks. Their movement seemed slow and messy compared to the exact formations that alien militaries taught. Look at their formation, Creer whispered to students around him. No mathematical precision at all. They are scattered like leaves blowing in wind. Captain Lisa Brooks appeared on screen, a woman in her 30s with short blonde hair and tired eyes. She was speaking to her second-in-command, Sergeant Danny Rodriguez, a strong man with dark hair and many scars on his arms. The evacuation is going as planned, Brooks said. Civilian transport ships are bringing families from the outer settlements. We have about 6 hours before the Vakor scouts reach the edge of our area. The alien students leaned forward with interest. Everyone knew stories about the Vakor. They were insect-like creatures the size of large trucks with sharp claws and thick skin that could stop weapons from most civilizations. Worse, they came in massive groups that beat enemies through sheer numbers. 6 hours is plenty of time for a proper retreat, commented Veltar. Even humans should be able to organize withdrawal in 6 hours. On screen, the human soldiers continued preparing, but something was wrong with what they were doing. Instead of packing equipment for escape, they were unpacking more weapons. Instead of setting up positions for a fighting retreat, they were building what looked like permanent defensive structures. Sixth frowned at the display. "What are they doing?" "That is not evacuation preparation." Dr. Carter paused the recording and turned to the auditorium. "I should explain the tactical situation. The Vakor swarm approaching this colony numbered roughly 50,000 individual warriors. The human force sent to help with evacuation numbered exactly 200 soldiers. Confusion spread through the student audience. These numbers made no sense with any military strategy they had learned. 50,000 against 200? Asked a student from the middle rows. What kind of evacuation plan needs such odds? That is what we are about to see, Dr. Carter replied, restarting the recording. The screen showed Captain Brooks receiving a message from Orbital Command. Her expression grew serious as she listened. When the communication ended, she gathered her soldiers around her. "Change of plans," Brooks announced. "Orbital surveillance shows the Vakor main force is moving faster than we thought. The civilian transports will not finish evacuating in time." Sergeant Rodriguez checked his tactical display. "How long do we have?" 2 hours, maybe less. The alien students watched as the human soldiers took in this information. By any military logic, this was when a smart commander would order immediate retreat. 200 soldiers could never stop 50,000 enemies for 2 hours. The only reasonable choice was to run and save as many people as possible. Captain Brooks looked at her soldiers for a long moment. Then she said something that made every alien student in the auditorium freeze. "We are not retreating." The camera captured the faces of the human soldiers as they heard this order. None looked shocked. None complained. A few actually smiled. "Sir," Rodriguez said, 50,000 Vakori against our unit. Those are impossible odds." "Yes, they are," Brooks agreed. "Which means the Vakori will not expect us to fight them directly. They will expect us to run. But we are not running." "No, Sergeant. We are going to kill them all." Complete silence filled the Academy auditorium. The alien students stared at the screen in disbelief. Creor's powerful brain tried to process what he had heard, but the logic did not work. "She cannot be serious," Zix whispered. "No rational commander would make such a choice." On screen, the human soldiers began preparations that violated everything the students had learned about military science. Instead of building defensive positions to slow the enemy, they were setting up what seemed to be offensive positions designed to force the Vakori into specific areas. "They are creating kill zones," observed a student whose people specialized in defensive tactics. "But kill zones only work when you have superior weapons. 200 soldiers cannot make enough firepower to stop 50,000 enemies." Dr. Carter paused the recording again. "At this point, I must remind you that everything you are about to see is real combat recording. No computer simulations, no training exercises. What you will see actually happened." She looked out at the sea of alien faces, all showing confusion and disbelief. The Vakor had already destroyed 3 entire star systems before this encounter. Their military tactics had worked against every species they had fought. They had never been defeated in open battle. Commander Turner stood up from his seat in the front row. The Vakor were not just another enemy species. They were an extinction-level threat to galactic life. If they had not been stopped at Kepler 442, they would have continued consuming worlds until nothing remained. "And you are telling us that 200 humans stopped them?" called out Zixth, her voice filled with doubt. "I am telling you to watch the recording and make your own conclusions," Turner replied. The recording resumed. The first Vakori scouts appeared on the horizon, massive insect-like shapes moving with frightening speed across the landscape. They were even larger than the alien students had thought, each one the size of a small building with claws that could tear through metal. The human soldiers took their positions. Captain Brooks stood in the center, completely calm despite the approaching horror. "Contact in 30 seconds, Rodriguez reported. "Remember," Brooks called to her soldiers. "They are used to prey that runs. They have never fought prey that hunts back." The Vakori scouts reached the human perimeter and attacked right away, expecting the same easy victory they had achieved on dozens of other worlds. But instead of panicked retreat, they met concentrated fire from weapons that seemed specifically built to pierce their armor. The first wave of scouts fell within minutes. "How did they know what weapons to use?" asked a student whose people prided themselves on military intelligence. The Vakor had never been successfully fought before. How could the humans know their weaknesses? On screen, more Vakori arrived. Hundreds, then thousands. The sound of their approach was like thunder, a rumbling that shook the camera. Any normal military force would have been crushed by the pure fear of facing such numbers. But the human soldiers seemed to become more focused as the odds got worse. 10,000 contacts and rising, Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite the approaching danger. Good, Captain Brooks replied. The more that come, the more we can kill in one place. Sixth stood up in her seat, her crystal features showing confusion and growing fear. This is impossible. No species thinks like this. No logical mind sees worse odds as a good thing. Dr. Carter stopped the recording once more. Miss Sixth, you have spent much time studying human thinking for your research paper. In your view, what mental condition would make a military commander see impossible odds as a tactical advantage? The young Zolonian thought carefully, her analytical mind trying to find a logical reason for what she was seeing. Madness, she said finally. Only madness would cause such thinking. Yes, Dr. Carter agreed quietly. That is exactly what the Galactic Council concluded. The question you must now ask is this: what happens when madness is applied in an organized way to military operations? She restarted the recording. On screen, the main Vakori force was beginning to arrive. 50,000 insect killers that had never known defeat. Approaching 200 humans who seemed truly excited about the impossible battle ahead. The alien students watched in growing horror as they began to understand that they were about to see something far beyond their comprehension. This was not outdated human tactics. This was something else entirely, something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The main Vakori force hit the human positions like a black wave of death. 50,000 insect warriors charged across the landscape, their claws gleaming in the alien sunlight. Each creature stood 3 meters tall with armor that had stopped weapons from 3 different civilizations. The alien students expected to see the humans break and run. Instead, they watched something that broke every military science principle they had ever learned. The humans opened fire with weapons that seemed built exactly to kill Vakori. But that was not the disturbing part. The disturbing part was how they used themselves as bait. Squad 7 moved to position Alpha, Captain Brooks ordered over the radio. Let them see you. On screen, 12 human soldiers ran forward into an exposed position where thousands of Vakor could see them clearly. The insect warriors immediately changed direction to attack this small, seemingly helpless group. They will be slaughtered, whispered Veltar, her wet skin growing pale as she watched. But Squad 7 did not retreat when the Vakori charged toward them. Instead, they held their position until the last possible second. Then Sergeant Rodriguez's voice came over the radio. Now. The ground around Squad 7 exploded. Hidden charges that had been placed earlier went off in perfect sequence, creating a chain reaction that killed over 2,000 Vakori in less than 10 seconds. The 12 human soldiers disappeared in the blast along with their enemies. Complete silence filled the Academy auditorium. They killed themselves, Krior said, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as his powerful brain tried to process what he had witnessed. They deliberately killed themselves to destroy the enemy. On screen, Captain Brooks watched the explosion calmly. Squad 7 eliminated. Enemy losses approximately 2,000. Acceptable exchange ratio. Acceptable. Sixth stood up again, her crystalline features showing the horror she felt. 12 lives for 2,000 is acceptable? Dr. Carter paused the recording. For humans engaged in total warfare, yes, that is considered an excellent exchange ratio. The students looked at each other in growing fear. This was not military tactics as they understood them. This was something far more terrifying. The recording continued. The remaining human soldiers regrouped and prepared for the next phase of their impossible battle. But instead of losing focus after the loss of Squad 7, they seemed more determined and ready. Rodriguez, take Squad 3 and pull their attention to the eastern approach, Brooks ordered. How many do you want us to take with us, Captain? Rodriguez asked. All of them. Rodriguez nodded as if this was a normal request. He gathered 15 soldiers and moved toward a position that would put them directly in front of the remaining Vakori swarm. This is insane, a student from the back called out. They are sending 15 soldiers against tens of thousands of enemies. But the humans had not finished preparing their nightmare tactics. As Squad 3 moved into position, the remaining soldiers were setting up something that made the alien students feel sick. Medical stations. Why are they setting up medical stations in the middle of a battle? Sixth read the human text on screen. Commander Turner stood up to address the confused students. Because wounded humans make excellent bait. The Vakor are attracted to the sounds of injured prey. The students stared at him in horror as they began to understand what they were seeing. On screen, Squad 3 engaged the main Vakori force in what seemed like a hopeless battle. The 15 humans were quickly overwhelmed, but they did not die quickly. Instead, they fought with a brutal skill that kept them alive just long enough to serve their purpose. The sounds of human soldiers screaming in pain drew thousands of Vakori toward the medical stations. The insect warriors expected to find easy victims. Instead, they found the most terrifying trap any species had ever created. Medical stations were not places of healing at all. They were weapons platforms disguised as healing centers. When the Vakori swarmed toward the sounds of wounded humans, they ran directly into concentrated fire that cut through their ranks like invisible blades. But the humans were not finished. The wounded soldiers, some barely alive, continued to serve as bait even as they lay dying. Their pain drew more and more Vakori into the kill zones where hidden weapons destroyed them by the thousands. "They are using their own wounded as weapons," Krior said, his voice barely a whisper. "They are weaponizing their own suffering." The recording showed Captain Brooks moving through the battlefield, coordinating the slaughter with calm precision. She stepped over the bodies of her own soldiers without emotion, focused entirely on maximizing enemy casualties. "Squad 5, take positions in Sector 7. Make sure you are visible when you get wounded." "Understood, Captain." "How long do you want us to stay alive after contact?" asked the squad leader. "Long enough to draw at least 5,000 targets into range." The alien students watched in sick fascination as Squad 5 deliberately exposed themselves to Vakore claws, taking wounds that would normally require immediate medical attention. But instead of seeking help, they used their injuries to pull more enemies into carefully prepared trap zones. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, weak with pain, but still determined. "I count 15,000 more contacts approaching from the north." "Good," Brooks replied, reloading her weapon with mechanical precision. "Channel them toward the civilian evacuation sites." "Toward the civilian sites," Zixth screamed, finally reaching her breaking point. "They are using civilian evacuation sites as bait." Dr. Carter paused the recording again. "The evacuation sites are empty. The civilians were moved to safe locations hours ago. But the Vakore do not know this." On screen, thousands of Vakore warriors rushed toward what they thought were helpless civilian targets. Instead, they found Captain Brooks and her remaining soldiers waiting in positions that offered no retreat and no escape. "Final phase," Brooks announced to her troops. "Remember, we do not need to survive this. We only need to complete the mission." What happened next broke every rule of warfare that the alien students had ever learned. The humans did not fight to take ground or to survive the battle. They fought to cause maximum enemy casualties with no concern for their own lives. Captain Brooks personally led a charge into the center of the Vakor swarm. She was not trying to break through enemy lines or capture a strategic position. She was trying to get close enough to the Vakore Queen to deliver a weapon that would destroy the entire command structure. The students watched in horrified silence as Brooks fought her way through hundreds of enemies, taking wounds that should have killed her but somehow staying alive through pure will. Vakore claws tore through her armor and opened deep wounds across her body, but she kept moving forward. "She is going to die," whispered Veltar. "She has to know she is going to die." "Of course she knows," Commander Turner said quietly. "That is the point. She is not trying to survive. She is trying to complete the mission." On screen, Captain Brooks reached the Vakore Queen, a massive creature that stood twice as tall as the other warriors. Brooks was bleeding from dozens of wounds. Her armor was torn and one of her arms hung useless at her side. But she was smiling. The Queen's claws pierced through Brooks's chest, lifting her off the ground. Any normal species would have died instantly from such wounds. But Brooks had one final action to complete. She activated the weapon she had carried through the entire battle, a device that released something into the Vakore Queen's body. The Queen convulsed and screamed, then collapsed. Within seconds, every Vakore warrior on the battlefield began to fall as well. Captain Brooks died with that smile still on her face, watching 50,000 enemies die around her. The recording ended with the aftermath. 200 human soldiers had engaged 50,000 Vakore warriors. Final casualties: 197 humans dead, 3 critically wounded. Vakore survivors 0. Mission status: complete victory. The academy auditorium was completely silent. The alien students sat frozen, trying to process what they had witnessed. Finally, Zixth found her voice. "Why?" she asked, her crystal features showing confusion and terror. "Why would anyone fight like that?" Dr. Carter looked out at the sea of horrified faces. "Because that is what humans do when we decide something must be stopped. We do not fight to survive. We fight to win regardless of the cost." Commander Turner stepped forward. "The Galactic Council did not ban humans from warfare to protect the galaxy from our weakness. They banned us to protect the galaxy from our strength." The terrible truth settled over the students like a heavy weight. The human restriction rule was not about human weakness. It was about human strength turned into something that other species could not understand or control. Something that even other humans feared to unleash. The next morning, the Galactic Naval Academy felt like a different place. Students walked through the hallways in small, quiet groups. The usual chatter and laughter had disappeared. In the dining areas, conversations stopped whenever someone mentioned humans or the recording they had seen. Zixth sat alone in the library, surrounded by books about human thinking and military history. Her crystalline features looked dull in the artificial light, as if the shine had gone out of them. She had not slept since watching the Kepler 442 recording. Creor found her there 3 hours later, his own powerful brain struggling to make sense of what they had witnessed. "I have been calculating all night," he said, sitting down across from her. "The choices the humans made should not have worked. No computer simulation predicts success with their methods. That is because no computer can simulate insanity," Zixth replied, without looking up from her books. "I have been reading human military writing. Do you know what I found?" Creor shook his head. "They have entire sections about acceptable death rates. 90% losses are considered reasonable if the mission succeeds. 90%, Creor. They plan for almost everyone to die." Other students began gathering around their table, drawn by the discussion. Word had spread quickly through the academy about what the recording contained. Everyone wanted to understand what they had seen. "But why?" asked Veltar, her wet skin still pale from the shock. "Why would any species develop such tactics?" "Because they work," said a new voice. Lieutenant Morrison had approached their table quietly. He looked tired, as if he had not slept either. "You saw the results. 200 soldiers destroyed a threat that had consumed 3 star systems." Zixth looked up at him with new eyes. Before yesterday, she had seen Morrison as a teacher of outdated methods. Now she saw something else entirely. "You knew," she accused. "You knew what we would see in that recording." Morrison nodded slowly. "I fought an action similar to Kepler 442 before the restriction was made. That is why I teach here instead of serving in active operations. Because the Council banned human military involvement." "No," Morrison said quietly, "because I asked to be transferred after seeing what humans do in total warfare. Some of us requested positions in non-combat roles." The students stared at him, a human soldier who had voluntarily removed himself from combat because he was afraid of his own species' methods. "What did you see out there?" Creor asked. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "I saw humans solve problems that no other species could solve. And I saw the price we pay for those solutions." Dr. Carter appeared at the library entrance looking for Morrison. When she saw the gathered students, she approached carefully. "How are you all feeling after yesterday's presentation?" she asked, confused. Zixth admitted. "Terrified. I do not understand how humans can think the way you do." "We do not think differently," Carter explained. "We just have different priorities. When we decide something must be stopped, we are willing to pay any price to stop it." "Any price," Veltar repeated. "Including our own lives," Morrison added. "Especially our own lives. Individual survival becomes meaningless when the species or mission is at stake." Dean Cordell entered the library with several other staff members. The 6-armed administrator looked troubled, his usual calm confidence shaken by the events of the previous day. "Students," he announced, "I want to discuss the petition you submitted regarding human military studies." Zixth stood up slowly, her petition forgotten in the wake of what she had learned. "Dean, I would like to take back the petition." "Why?" "Because I was wrong. Completely, terrifyingly wrong. Human military methods are not outdated. They are something else entirely, something we need to understand." Creor nodded in agreement. "The tactical principles they showed yesterday are beyond anything we study here. They have weaponized ideas that other species cannot grasp. such as acceptable loss, tactical sacrifice, victory through self-destruction. They fight to win regardless of survival, which makes them the most dangerous military force in known space. Dean Cordell considered this carefully. And what is your recommendation regarding the human restriction rule? The students looked at each other, then back at the dean. Finally, Sixth spoke for all of them. The restrictions should continue, not to protect humans from us, but to protect us from humans. You believe they are that dangerous? Dean Cordell asked. The recording showed us one small unit destroying an extinction-level threat, Creer said, his powerful brain having processed all the implications. Imagine what would happen if humans decided that another species posed a similar threat. The implications hung in the air like a dark cloud. Every student understood what Creer meant. If humans could destroy 50,000 Vakore with 200 soldiers, what could they do with a full military fleet? There is something else you should consider, Dr. Carter said quietly. The Kepler 442 incident happened 50 years ago. Human military technology and tactics have advanced significantly since then. You mean they have gotten better at warfare? Feltar asked, her voice barely a whisper. Much better? Morrison confirmed. The methods you saw yesterday are considered outdated by current human military standards. Complete silence fell over the library. The students tried to imagine warfare more advanced than what they had witnessed and could not. Then why do humans accept the restriction? Sixth asked. If you are as powerful as the recording suggests, why do you allow the Council to limit your military involvement? Morrison and Carter exchanged glances. Finally, Morrison answered, because we choose to. We understand what we are capable of, and we understand that other species fear us for good reason. We accept the restrictions because we want to be part of galactic civilization, not its destroyers. But the choice is yours, Dean Cordell observed. You could reject the restrictions at any time, Carter agreed. The restriction only works because humans enforce it on ourselves. The day we decide to stop accepting it, she let the sentence hang unfinished, but everyone understood the implication. Over the following weeks, the academy changed completely. Lieutenant Morrison's classes became the most popular on campus. Students who had once mocked human military methods now studied them with fearful fascination. Research papers shifted from criticizing human tactics to analyzing human combat thinking and the tactical uses of acceptable casualties. The library's human military history section, once ignored, became constantly busy. But the biggest change was in how the students viewed the human restriction rule. What had once seemed like proof of human weakness was now understood as the most important peace treaty in galactic history. Sixth presented her final research paper to a packed auditorium. The title had changed from her original plan. Why the Human Restriction Rule Must Continue, a study in voluntary restraint as ultimate power. We have learned that humans are not restricted from galactic warfare because they are outdated or ineffective, she concluded. They are restricted because they have weaponized ideas that other species cannot understand. Acceptable loss, tactical sacrifice, and victory through self-destruction. She paused, looking out at her fellow students. Every species in the galaxy fights to survive. Humans fight to win regardless of survival. This makes them more dangerous than any weapon we have ever made. Therefore, the human restriction rule should continue not as punishment for human weakness, but as protection for galactic life. The auditorium erupted in applause, but it was not cheerful academic applause. It was grim applause from beings who had looked into the abyss and understood what they had seen. After the presentation, Sixth found Lieutenant Morrison in his office. Lieutenant, I have one final question. What is it? The recording showed humans choosing to accept terrible deaths to achieve victory. But you also choose to accept restrictions that limit your power. Why? Morrison looked out his office window at the alien students walking across the campus, laughing and learning together in the peaceful environment of the academy. Because some victories are not worth the price, he said quietly. We could control the galaxy through fear. We could destroy any species that opposes us. But what kind of life would that be? We choose restraint. We choose to be better than what we are capable of being. That is the most human thing of all. As Sixth left his office, she realized she had learned the most important lesson of her education. The most dangerous beings in the galaxy were not those who could destroy everything. The most dangerous beings were those who could destroy everything but chose not to. And somewhere in the depths of space, Humanity continued to patrol the borders of civilization, accepting restrictions they could break at any moment, protecting species that feared them, and carrying the burden of being the galaxy's most terrible and most necessary guardians. The restriction would hold as long as humans chose to honor it, and everyone hoped they would never choose otherwise.